All right, everyone. Hello, hello. We've got some people watching. Monique's here.
Yes,
we got Kevin.
Yep. Family meeting.
All right, let's do it.
Come on.
So, people jumping on. This is good. We're going to have a good conversation. Monique's at home. I'm at the office. If Monique doesn't fall asleep during the stream, then we'll...
I make no promises.
If she disappears, she fell asleep. So I'm going to kind of lead the conversation a little bit. Dream team. That's nice, Elaine. We'll see if everybody stays awake. All right. So I've been texting Kevin all week with all my questions about war.
I can confirm. She has.
Because Monique's on the string too. It's the three of us.
I just sit in the background.
Yeah, she just watches.
Yeah, that's why I just said, just call me.
Just call me. I got questions. So I've been watching a lot of interviews with pro-Palestine. I don't think they would like it if I said that they were pro-Hamas, but they kind of sound like they're Hamas apologists.
I mean,
yeah.
At some point, I feel like you just got to call a duck a duck. You quacking over there like a duck. You in the duck camp. You swimming in the pond with the ducks. I mean, let's take the whole BLM situation, and those people not wanting, people who, support BLM and things like that. And I'm not saying every BLM supporter is a Hamas supporter, but when the BLM Chicago made that poster saying that they support Palestine, well, the poster itself had the picture of the Hamas parachuters or paragliders coming down. So are you for Palestine, or are you for those who acted in the way that they acted from Hamas?
Because there's a lot of energy saying, well, don't mix up or don't conflate Hamas and Palestine. Those are two different things. And yet I've watched a lot of content in the last week, and the pro-Palestine apologists seem to be defending Hamas. So it's a little confusing to me.
Yeah, Patrisse Cullors. Founder of BLM.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people know that it's not good to say you support Hamas, so they don't want to say it, but they do. That's why they call them like resistance fighters and things like that, right? They'll kind of say, I don't condone what they did, but I understand why they did it. It's just one of those kind of, they want to soften it up. At the end of the day, like that professor from Columbia said, it was exhilarating when he heard the news what was happening. Exhilarating.
I haven't heard that one.
Oh, yeah. A black professor from Columbia. Yeah. Exhilarating was the word he used.
So I keep texting Kevin, asking all my questions. So I said, finally, maybe we should have this conversation in public, because maybe other people are having a lot of the same questions I am. So I kind of went through a bunch of content today and collated themes and questions that I kept hearing over and over and over again related to the messaging, and really wanting to have Kevin help us think about these things based on his knowledge and experience. And I'll let Kevin give the proper disclaimers so that we understand how he's speaking. But hopefully you can help us understand it from based on your experience, as well as, from a Christian worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just, I have a degree in Middle Eastern Studies. I have a 21-year career focused on the Middle East. And so that's kind of where my expertise comes from. But I mean, the disclaimer is just anything I say is representative of my own thoughts and no one else. So I'll just put it like that.
Yeah, that's good. So obviously, I think one of the things I keep hearing is the word genocide. And as Christians, we believe that all humans are created in the image of God. This means that they have inherent value, dignity, and worth. But I keep hearing the claim on a lot of the interviews on both sides, that the other side wants genocide. So it's kind of like two fingers pointing in the opposite direction, that they both want genocide. And I'm thinking maybe we need to take a deep breath here and define genocide. Like, is there a technical wartime international definition of that term?
Yes. I don't know if you have it up, but a genocide is basically an intentional, systematic approach to eradicating a people group, right? So you're basically trying to eradicate them off the face of the earth. We saw this. Rwanda is a great example of a genocide. We know the Holocaust, right? So those are genocides. That word being used in this context is what I call propaganda. You know, and anybody who uses that word automatically loses credibility. I don't care if it's on Twitter. I don't care if it's in an interview. And I'll say this, anybody who uses that word in terms of what is actually going on and calls it a genocide should be discredited. If somebody on the Jewish side says, hey, Hamas would want a genocide, that is a valid point of Jews. When they chant from the river to the sea, that's exactly what they mean. Palestine will be free, right? The only way Palestine is free from the river to the sea is if you completely wipe out the Jewish state that it currently exists there, right? It's just an outworking of what they want. And so that's really a lot of the backstory and context behind what we have, because a lot of people who want peace want this kind of two-state solution. Well, for a two-state solution to work, you have to have two parties that want a two-state solution. If one party is, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to get into that. And so just as an official body, I went on the UN website. Okay, that's an international body. All right. So here's what they say about genocide. Genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, I didn't even know that was a word, racial or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mentally harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So this is, according to the UN, how they're defining it.
Yeah, I would go C through E are kind of legitimate. Basically, you're trying to wipe out the group to where it no longer exists. So that can be through imposing births, like they can't birth anymore. It could be, taking their kids and putting them in the other group so that this one people group no longer exists. It is the intent to wipe out a people group. That is what a genocide is. Causing mental harm. Come on.
Yeah, or just killing members of the group. I don't know if that really...
You can call anything a genocide. It's simply killing members of the group. It's what it's the intent to, they no longer exist.
Okay, well, that was my understanding of what the traditional definition was too, but it's confusing. I mean, if somebody like the UN and is saying, to me, that's a fairly vague definition. So no wonder, we're getting on the chat shows and seeing a lot of confusion. So, but, let's go into, what you were going to say there. I kind of interrupted you about the history of Israel.
Before we go to the history, I do have a question in looking more at the definition of genocide. So I feel like Hamas's very stated and clear intent regarding the Jews and regarding the West and regarding Americans and things like that, does genocide have to take place all at once, kind of like we saw with the Holocaust? It took place over a span of time, but it was continuous. Can you see or say that genocide was being enacted, or they were trying to do genocidal acts in, like, different pieces. So this situation that happened earlier this month in Israel, that was an act that would be meant, one act, one of many that they would want to use to wipe out Jews.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I would put it like this. If Hamas had the military power and strength, what you saw on October 7th would be widespread throughout the country,
Mhm.
right? If they had the power, they just don't have it. So we can't call October 7th
Yeah.
a genocide.
Yeah.
They have no power to carry it out,
Mhm.
right? But
On a mass scale.
on a mass scale, right?
Okay.
But if they did have the power to carry it out, they are very clear that they would.
And genocide occurs on mass scale, even if, like, let's say it was 1,000 this year and 1,000 next year and 1,000, because it's not happening
Yeah,
in
you
mass
can't
at once.
wipe out a people group taking
Yeah.
out 1,000 people a year. You just can't.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah.
So in that, when we hear that saying, and I don't have the clip, but there was a protest yesterday, or I don't know what to call it, at NYU, where there was a group of college students chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Yes.
Well, that sounds pretty. Everybody's for freedom. Americans of all people should be for freedom. But what you're saying is that doesn't mean what it sounds like. From the, the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is actually a genocidal statement toward Jews. Is that what I am to understand?
Yes, they want the Jewish state of Israel to no longer exist. Right. And I don't know how you plan for the state of Israel not to exist other than to wipe it out. Right. From the river to the sea. I don't think they're talking about buses and planes just exporting Jews out. They're talking about by force. They're talking about a military action. They're talking about a resistance, these freedom fighters coming in and doing what they did on October 7th, but pushing the Jews to the sea, right? That is what they want. And so, yeah, this whole thing is so one-sided because for a two-state solution to work, you have to have two sides that are willing to be okay with the two-state solution. And
to live side by side.
To live side by side with one another. And when one slogan is from the river to the sea, they have said they have no desire for a two-state solution. I mean, the whole Arab position, Palestinian position has been the three no's. I don't know if we talked about that last time. No peace, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiating. That is their stance. And so every time throughout history, there has been a peace agreement in place or like a handshake, the Palestinians have attacked Israel to undo the peace agreement, right? For this two-state solution. Remember with Bill Clinton, the Oslo Accords, right? They were shaking hands and like they had a deal. Well, they immediately launched
it was Yasser Arafat.
Yasser Arafat, yes.
And I can't remember the Jewish representative, but
yeah. But also it runs deeper because this is the thing. While there might be some Palestinians who will say, okay, let's have our own state here. This is our land. We have Gaza. We have the West Bank. Let's build our own. They still had to appease the hardliners, right? You still have the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad and the Palestinian Authority members who were hardliners that were saying, no, they would never negotiate. They would never be a two-state. They want all of it from the land to the sea. They want this land back, right? And so you can't really have peace or negotiation with someone who is not dedicated to the same goals, right? And so that's kind of been where we are. Every time there's a road for peace, the Palestinian leadership, they call an attack on Israel and they undo it. Also, it's important to remember. So Israel, after the 1967 war, the 6-Day War, they captured parts of Egypt. They captured the whole Sinai Peninsula and they held it for like 13, 14 years. They initially made a deal with Egypt. Okay, we'll give you the peninsula back for peace. And they did. Well, the Egyptian president who brokered that peace deal with Israel, he got assassinated.
That was Sadat, if I remember.
Yeah, he got
Anwar
assassinated
Sadat,
for
yeah.
making a peace deal with Israel. So that tells you the level of hatred that is on that side. That if these leaders were to make a peace deal, they could have been assassinated. And so every time there was a peace deal on the table for this two-state solution, that Israel's whole plan was trade land. We'll give you this if you give us peace. They've only wanted peace. And every time that comes up, it gets sabotaged with an attack on Israel. The hardliners are saying no. And so there is no peace with someone who doesn't have the same goals. And so
another thing I keep hearing, and we're going to get through all of this because I really want to address a lot of these themes that I keep hearing over and over and over again, because it's really the same 6 or 7 talking points. Another one that I keep hearing is pro-Palestinian advocates are saying that Gaza is an open air prison. I mean, this is the mantra that I hear on nearly every interview. Yes. And that Jews are genocide deniers who created, I wrote this down verbatim from one of the chat shows that I watched. Gaza is an open air prison and Jews are genocide deniers who created the need for this attack. Now, many of the spokesmen for Palestinians will call this the resistance. So they're even going so far as to say Israel are the ones who are the terrorists and Palestinians are just trying to resist the terrorists.
Yes.
And that Israel's goal is to commit genocide against the Palestinians, to extinguish them. So there's a lot of claims in here. We've got the open air prison. We've got the Israelis are terrorists and, the genocide questions. So help us start to make sense of some of these claims.
Yeah. You got to remember, all of this is a PR campaign to the West, right? It is, they are campaigning to us because they know that, and not just the United States, but like the UN and just the West and the powers that be, they are making their case for something, right? And so a lot of it is simply talking points and propaganda. It doesn't have to be historically true or factually true. It just simply has to be driving up propaganda for their side. And so the open air prison part, October 7th showed you why Israel, and this is, I'm gonna use this word intentionally, has such strong security measures in place, right? Security measures, right? They walled off their border with Gaza. First of all, let's acknowledge Gaza is not occupied. There was no Jewish settlements. There's no Israeli Defense Force presence in Gaza. Completely Palestinian control. All of theirs. It's all theirs. And so the fact that Israel closes off its border to it, that's Israel's prerogative. But we see why they've done it. Why they have this elaborate security apparatus in place is so that Hamas and these terrorists don't come out. Because this is what people don't remember. In the 90s and the early 2000s, there were so many terrorist attacks within Israel. Suicide bombers. They would blow up buses. They would blow up nightclubs, markets. Like any type of public event was a chance that there was going to be a bomb there or a suicide bomber. And
so what I'm showing, what I'm showing on screen here is that Gaza area that's in question. It's in the southern part of Israel. You can see in that map in the top left corner, and you can see that big red kind of wall around it, if you will. That is is that wall on Israel's side? They're saying we're protecting ourselves and having a border wall, and then that southern part is on the Egyptian border, as far as I understand.
And that is very key to this argument that Gaza is an open air prison, because the only way it can be a quote unquote open air prison is if that Egyptian border is also closed, and it is. So why does Egypt close their border off to Gaza? Right? That's the part nobody wants to talk about. The Egyptians don't want them either. They don't want them into Egypt. Even in this crisis, Egypt refuses to open up its border to let refugees out. Egypt does not want them. And so that's the part we need to talk about. What is it about Gaza? What is it about the Palestinians that even the Egyptians won't allow them through? Right? If you just want to have an open, honest discussion, none of this open air prison talk can exist unless Egypt also closes its border.
But you hear this on every single interview.
Yes, because they know people will buy. And fail it is. It's not about. It's just simply winning people's hearts and minds to make people empathetic to their cause. Mm-hmm. And there's the thing: they really don't have a cause. Israel is not going away, right? This 75-year grievance of land is never going to be returned. And not that it was even, and that I even hate to use that word "return" because it wasn't like it was, say the land was stolen. No, the land was gained in two ways: legitimate purchase. This is one thing that was happening when all of this Balfour Declaration and stuff started happening. There were major campaigns in Europe to raise money. Jews were raising money like crazy to go to Israel and buy land from people who were living there. And they did. They bought land and built settlements. Over time, the reason that Israel gained more and more territory was because they would get attacked. They would drive those forces back and they would hold and gain more territory. And so this is what they don't talk about. The Arab countries around Israel attacked Israel. 1948, they attacked them. And these areas this whole thing about a Palestinian state is new talk. Those back in the day, Gaza was controlled by Egypt. West Bank was controlled by Jordan. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon all attack Israel. Israel wins that fight. And in winning that fight, they capture more land, right? 1967, same thing. The Arab neighbors attack Israel. Israel wins that fight. Israel gains more land. So what this really is Arabs upset that they've lost. They attacked and they lost land. And now their whole grievance is you stole our land. It's like, no, you lost it. You attacked somebody, you lost, and now they're holding land. And a lot of reasons Israel was holding land was for defensive reasons, right? The reason they held the Sinai Peninsula, the reason they held the West Bank, the reason they held the Golan, all of these enemies that kept attacking them. And so if Israel's controlling all this buffer, you can't launch rockets, you can't, forge an attack on them. And over time, they gave land back in peace deals. So it's like, we'll give you this land back, but you got to promise, not to attack us.
So on the screen there, I've got the map from 1949, for example, and you can see really clear how Israel is surrounded: Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt.
Yes.
And that the red West Bank area was controlled
by
Jordan. Gaza was Egyptian controlled. And so when Israel gets attacked and then wins, the question is well, then, who owns that land? Because that's another part of the narrative, is you always constantly hear the word that Israel is an occupier.
Yes.
And this is the language in almost universally in the media, is Israel is an occupier. They took this land, they stole the land, and really all the Palestinians want is their land back, the land of their grandfathers, if you will. Yeah. And if that's true, then Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself with force. And in fact, the Palestinians are the ones who have the right to defend themselves from Israeli aggression because the land was stolen from them. So, and this is where this is just the muddy place
it is
that we end up in.
because go ahead, Mo.
This to me, as I hear you guys talking and the things that I see, and even Elaine's comment, it to me, this is just the world of contemporary critical theory. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is what it is. This and I don't think people understand really or see it. And I think we were talking offline, maybe in a text, about just critical Muslim theory or critical Islam theory. Like I don't think people understand that all of these words are really key words, just like we saw in 2020, these key words floating around to really and you framed it correctly as propaganda. It's to get tug at your heartstrings. People will believe the narrative, and this is what we explained in 2020, 2021, that people come with this narrative, this I don't feel safe to go outside my house. Like the LeBron James, the narrative without
Mm-hmm.
understanding the history and the fact behind something, but the narrative is what pulls on your heart. And I feel like we are in such of the same conversation today in regards to the Gaza and Israel situation, or Hamas and Palestine situation, and looking at well, are Israelis just occupants? Are they colonialists? Are they participating in this colonialism? And have they stolen the land? Elaine says, I think her comment might be too long to put on the stream, but she says, I saw a meme comparing American natives not having their ancestral land to Israelis land that supposedly belonged to them because it used to be
In
because
the
it used to
family.
be in the
In the
family, so to
family.
speak. It just the whole idea of post-colonial theory, or who owns the land, or who belongs here, who took the land, it really boils down to a conversation of power. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're watching, and that even goes back to your comment, Krista, about from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free, or Palestinians will be free. It's what are they being set free from? Well, they're being
Colonialism.
set free from the colonialism. They're being set free from their oppression. They're being set
Mm.
free from all of these things that may or may not be true, but that some people are buying into hook, line, and sinker without having done any research. It's about how are you going to support this oppressed people? So I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm just sitting here and all of my critical theory thing, like
Yeah.
bells.
Spidey senses are going
If
off.
if you want to know why the American progressive left have taken the side of the Palestinians, that's exactly what it is. It's critical theory, it's post-colonial studies, it's all of that, right? And so in their framework, the Palestinians are the oppressed, the Israelis are the oppressors. And it has a lot to do with color, right? Um, because these Jews are viewed as white.
Mhm.
The fact that the British were involved in establishing this Jewish state, that is colonialism, right? But one thing too that people don't realize is that, number one, there's never been a Palestinian state. This has always been, what do you call it? Empire territory. Like different empires over time have held this territory. Back in the biblical days of the Romans, and you had the Arabs came in when Islam came into play. You had the Christians come in the Crusades. Then you had the Ottomans take over, and then after the Ottomans, you had the British. And then after the British established this Jewish state back there in the land of Israel. So there's never been any kind of Palestinian state. There's never been a president of Palestine or anything like that. This has
Yeah,
always been.
one of the videos I watched in researching all of this is that said that the identity of the Palestinians was something that was kind of constructed about 100 to 120 years ago to begin to create an identity that was rooted in this
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is, but it was on a secular video that
Yeah.
was not pro-Jewish, so I'm thinking that's could possibly be true.
Yeah.
But it didn't sound like the idea of the Palestinian, I don't know whether to call it a nationality or ethnicity, but it didn't sound like it was going back thousands of years.
No. And this is the thing too. This is what a lot of people don't understand. When Jews started to migrate back to the land in the early 1900s, it was a very scarcely populated region. There weren't a whole lot of people living there. And I heard someone mention about, they said Mark Twain went and visited in the early 1900s and he wrote about it. And I had to go look it up. And he did. He wrote about going to Israel, and he said it was desolate. It was barren. And his question was, when are the Jews coming back? Right? There was hardly no one living there. Like, it wasn't what it is today that is all built up and settled. It was a barren land to a lot of degree. And Jews started coming in there and setting up settlements and all of that kind of stuff. And so there's this context to how we got here that gets left out all the time. It wasn't this. And also when you talk about their land got stolen, a lot of times, well, a lot of it happened in 1948, because like I say, Jordan was controlling this land, Egypt. And before they attacked, they told people in that region, Arabs, to leave because they were going to attack, right? Well, those people never got to come back home because the Jews took it over, because the Jews won the war, right? So a lot of those people gave up their land because Jordan was going to attack, because Egypt was going to attack, right? And it's a lot of bitterness due to loss in war. That's a lot of this is. And the idea that, and then once you lose the war, you cry victim, you cry occupier. It's like, you shouldn't attack them. And that's just me from a military standpoint. If you attack somebody and they fight back and they take over your land, it's not your land anymore. You know, that's right or wrong. That's just kind of history has been that way. Right.
And that wars happen, land is conquered, land changes hand. That seems to be what you're arguing.
That's what I'm arguing. And the fact that the people in Gaza and in the West Bank think that there's going to be some, well, that's what the Arab armies tried to do many times, was militarily come and take all the land back, and they failed many times, and they keep failing, and they want to keep on. Well, I should say this: the Arab nations around them have largely given up on it. They've made peace with Israel. They have pretty much given up on this whole idea that the Jews are going to be thrown into the sea. What we have now is Hamas in Gaza, and you have them being funded by the non-Arab Iranians, right? So the Iranians are funding this group because Iran and Israel are mortal enemies at the moment, right? And so there's a lot of geopolitics in this that go way beyond this current land disagreement that people are playing on, because the surrounding Arab nations for years have kind of become peace with Israel. They've got peace deals. They've normalized relations. You know, under President Trump, you had the Abraham Accords.
Right.
And so they've largely given up on this idea that they were going to throw Israel into the sea. But the people in Gaza, under the premise of Hamas, have not. And they're still fighting this war. And unless there's nothing that can take them away from it. Once somebody is into an ideology so deep they're willing to give their life for it, there's nothing you can do to take them off of it.
Yeah.
Right. And Israel has realized that there will never be peace as long as Hamas is next door. And so Israel has decided that Hamas can no longer be there. They're going in to root them out. And what comes after that will be up to Israel and the world community, I'll say.
Well,
right?
let me get into that a little bit, because that is okay, another pro-Palestinian, I don't know, I think more accurately entitled pro-Hamas talking point that I see in all the chat shows is that there's really what Hamas did on October 7th is really no different than what Israel is doing to Gaza now, like with all the bombing of Gaza, cutting off their water and electricity and promising to annihilate them. The allegations on both sides now is that both sides are killing innocent victims and raping people. And both Hamas and Israel are guilty of war crimes. And I don't even know what the technical definition of a war crime is. And so give us some insight into that.
There's a lot of ignorance out there. people think if civilians die in a conflict, it's a war crime. That's not true. It has a lot to do with intent. If we, for example, when we accidentally bombed that hospital in Afghanistan, it's not a war crime because it was not intentional. It was a failure, it was a mistake, but it's not a war crime because the intent was not to target and bomb a hospital, right? The difference between what Hamas did on October 7th and what Israel is doing is intent to kill civilians. That was all of Hamas's goals. They landed at a music festival and slaughtered people. They ran up to vehicles and just sprayed the whole car down. They killed whole families and burned them. Like, their whole point was to go in and ravage and kill civilians. What Israel is doing is trying to go after the people who did that. But the people who did that, it's not like when two militaries fight and you have uniforms on and you got tanks and missiles and you're fighting force on force.
This isn't World War I where we dig trenches and we put all the soldiers in the trenches and then they duke it out.
No,
this isn't that.
This isn't that. This is terror. This is a terrorist group that wears civilian clothes, that hides behind civilians, that shoots rockets from civilian neighborhoods. And even as Nancy Pelosi said years ago, I saw this clip. Unfortunately, when you fire rockets, they have a return address, right? So when they fire a rocket from an apartment complex and Israel responds to take out the rocket position, you can't scream about civilian deaths when you're the one putting civilians in harm's way and putting military targets next to civilian targets or civilian places. You can't, but it's all propaganda. It's all done. So it's two reasons it's done. Number one, it's done because they know that it will deter response in some cases, right? And so they're using it as protection to hide because they know that, like the United States, Israel is going to be very hesitant to just go in and just try to wipe out a building full of civilians. They're just not going to do that. But the other thing is, when Israel does respond, if civilians are killed in it, then they can say, oh, look at our dead, look at our civilians, look what Israel's doing, right? And it's propaganda. And people in the West fall for it over and over again. The prime example is the hospital that they claimed that Israel struck a couple of days ago. It came out. Every news agency, Israel strikes hospital, 500 dead.
And I think it was the only Christian hospital in Gaza. My daughter said she thought it was an Anglican-run hospital, which, it says that they killed like 500 people in that terrible situation.
Until there's video evidence that it was a failed Islamic Jihad is another terrorist group in Gaza. They fired a rocket. They fired several rockets. One of them malfunctioned and came down and hit the hospital. They were firing them from behind the hospital. And one of them at launch failed, came down. And it's the thing, it didn't even hit the hospital. It landed in the parking lot, right? And so when the pictures came out the next day, you saw the burned out cars. And the further you got away, you saw less and less burned out cars, right? This wasn't some massive strike. It didn't even hit the hospital. It hit the parking lot. But what did you see? You saw headlines of 500 people killed.
Yeah.
You saw videos.
You don't think that really was a thing?
I know it wasn't a thing.
You don't think 500 people were killed in that?
I know 500 people did not get killed in the parking lot.
That's propaganda.
It's propaganda. But they even had videos of doctors trying to save children that were killed and hurt in this explosion that hit the hospital. The hospital was untouched. But how many people today know that? Right? There's no correction of news headlines, right? And so that's what I mean. It's propaganda, and that's why they want civilians hurt and killed, because it's good for them. So Hamas. And this is the thing, because they're talking about as a genocide. What people that want to commit a genocide tells the people to get out. Like Israel told them, we're coming in. You have 24 hours to leave.
I've even heard that's a lie, that Israel doesn't really do that.
They do it all the time. They and this it's the same thing we did when we went into Fallujah, right? Anytime, because you're fighting a terrorist group. And so what you do is you give a time period for civilians to leave. And after that time period, you tell them anybody who stays behind will be viewed as an enemy combatant. So the innocent people leave, and the people who stay behind are the people that are there to fight. And so that's what Israel has done. And so if you're in that region that they told you to leave, not only they tell people to leave, they said, or get to known shelters. So there are known shelters in these regions as well. So they said, get to a known shelter, because they're not going to hit those shelters. And they said, or leave, or get out the region, right? That is not somebody who's trying to commit genocide. That's why none of this it's all propaganda. So when they get on TV and they start shouting about a genocide taking place, it's only to win the hearts and minds of opinions of people in the West. And so we just need to know that.
There's a comment here that kind of is along those lines, and then Monique, you can jump in, but it says the Palestinians are like the Black Americans in the inner city. Liberal whites need to save who they believe are the oppressed. And that's kind of what I hear you saying in this, is that in the West, we can be a very compassionate people.
Yes.
But our compassion gets preyed upon. It sounds like what you're saying is our compassion is being preyed upon.
Yes, 100%.
Go ahead.
100%.
Like, are we uber compassionate, or is like the hoodwink and bamboozle just our thing, or are we intentionally being lied to create something else? Like, I don't I'm like, yeah, we can be super compassionate, and like I understand that, but I also wonder, or it makes me wonder, what is the goal of preying on all of our compassion, or this hoodwink and bamboozle? And this isn't even a question that needs to necessarily be answered. It's just something that I'm mulling on. It's like, well, what is the end goal for us in the West? Like, where are you trying to lead us if all of the news outlets and like major media is showing us this narrative and not the other narrative? Like, we're being led somewhere. Where are we being led to, and what is the goal? Like, why do they want us to be led to that place?
Yeah.
My question is if Iran is one of the major funders of a group like Hamas, well, who's funding Iran? Like, how are, like, to me, it's just there are so many questions that I feel like people aren't answering and don't really want to talk about all the way.
It comes back to kind of those critical studies, right? Everything is blamed on imperialism. Exactly. Everything is blamed on colonialism. So no matter what Iran is doing or Hamas is doing, at the end of the day, it's our fault.
That part.
At the end of the day, it's Israel's fault. And that's the message. That's what they want to get from this. Oh, and they're also trying to shape foreign policy, right? They're trying to, force a ceasefire that's not going to. A ceasefire only gets us back to October 6th. It doesn't change anything. It gets Israel back into a defensive position, hoping that their defenses are good enough to keep Hamas from killing their people. And you get Hamas planning their next attack. That's all we go back to.
Let me, along those lines, let's explore that, because Elaine's asking, say in 5 to 10 years, is anything going to be different? Could Hamas be defeated or quelled? Because all the calls in the media now from all of the pro-Palestinian voices is ceasefire. There needs to be a ceasefire. Israel needs to stop what they're doing. What is Israel's intent? I mean, are they just determined that they will
no longer live next door to Hamas? They're going to destroy Hamas.
Yeah.
And people want a ceasefire. Some people want a ceasefire because they're very empathetic to the suffering of the Palestinian people. Some people want a ceasefire because they want to save Hamas from being destroyed. Right?
Do you think Israel has the firepower to significantly damage Hamas?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. If Israel ever wanted to commit a genocide in that region, they could. There's no military power in that region that could stop Israel. If Israel just completely lost their mind, right, and said, forget it, we're killing everybody, they could, right? But they haven't, because that's never been their goal. Israel's goal has always simply been security. They just want to live there in peace. But their neighbors don't want that. They
want to kill them. Their neighbors want to kill them.
Yeah. So it's like, imagine if we in the United States lived with ISIS on our border, and ISIS was just content to, if they get in, they're going to kill as many of us as they can. Right. That is what Israel lives with every single day. Right. So regardless of how do you feel about the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people, you have to understand that Hamas is an ISIS, Al-Qaeda, is a terrorist organization who, and I know people are kind of making this link between, blacks and liberals. And I'll say this. If Hamas really cared about the people of Gaza, they really cared about the Palestinians, they would focus on building the best society they could for them to thrive and flourish in, build an economy, trade, right? But instead, they keep the grievance going, because the grievance is what they need to create more fighters, right? Peace is never their goal. Their goal is jihad. It is Israel to the sea or die trying. That is the only two options. There is no peace. And that's what I want the rest of the world, or our watchers, to understand. There is no peace as long as Hamas exists. It just isn't. And so the only way for peace to be long-term is for Hamas to go. And that's what Israel has decided. And this is the thing. I'm not going to say Israel is perfect. I'm not going to say that Israel has never done anything wrong or hit a target. I'm not going to say anything like that. What I'm saying is the overall intentions of Israel is the eradication of Hamas and the security of their nation. That is it. If the Palestinian people want to live there in peace, they can. Because this doesn't think people don't realize too, 20% of people who live within Israel are Arabs, right? Israel isn't this homogeneous state. There are Arabs that live in Israel.
Well, there's Arabs in the government.
Yes.
Do you think the Hamas government would allow Jews to be in the government? I don't think so.
They would kill them the minute they saw them. That's the difference. There is a level of hatred that is there. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. Maybe you can find videos one day of kind of some of the school curriculum they teach to the children. These children grow up hating Israel, and they're taught it. It's in the curriculum. And all the suicide bombers are martyrs. And it's just, the whole thing is just, there's just no way for that to ever be a land of peace with that type of education. And then, like I said, you keep the conditions bad, so the people are disgruntled. And this is the thing, that's why I'll tie it back to kind of BLM. You keep the people disgruntled and you tell them the reason for your issues is because of them. And you keep them angry at them and focus
keep those grievances flowing.
You keep the grievances going. And that is what is happening. It is keeping the grievance. Because, and it's the thing, Hamas leaders don't even live in Gaza. They live in Qatar. They're living in luxury, right? And the people are over there struggling.
What? Wait, what?
Yeah, Hamas's main top leaders live in Qatar. That's why the Qataris are always kind of negotiating back and forth. And now, the Qataris are the middleman. The Hamas.
You got to be kidding me.
No, they live in Qatar.
That's like when Monique told me Patrice Cullors, she doesn't live in the inner city. She lives in Toluca Lake.
Among the white people.
And
people.
This is another thing. So Israel pulls out of Gaza in 2005. In 2006, they hold elections. The Palestinian Authority, who was in charge, loses that election in a landslide to Hamas. Hamas won the election. For the next couple of years, you had a civil war in Gaza between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. Hamas wins. But it just tells you how unstable that region is, right? It is not a flourishing government thing that just it is a hot mess, right? And so for peace to happen, what Israel is doing has just simply been a matter of time. It was just a matter of time. It has to happen, whether it's happened. If they call a ceasefire and everything stops, we'll be right back here in 5 years, 6 years, however long it takes for Hamas to pull off another major attack. We'll be right back in the same place. Nothing will.
But don't you think? I have so many questions, and the clock is ticking. But I got at least
going over.
I mean, I got at least 2 more things I want to ask about.
Okay, go ahead.
People have questions in the comments.
Yeah,
girl, buckle up.
The thing is that if I'm wondering if part of the problem in the West is that we don't really understand that war is hell. You know, there's a reason for that saying, like, we are so effeminized.
Yes.
That the very idea of going to war and understanding that the saying war is hell, it has meaning, and that there will be mistakes made, there will be loss of life, there will be tragedies, but at some point people have to stand up to bullies and say enough is enough, and we're going to take drastic action to protect ourselves. But I don't think that we in the West, okay. When I see old men wearing veterans hats on the airplane, because we travel so much, and so we see a lot of these older gentlemen with hats, I think that guy is, I got to think of another word than the cuss word I'm thinking of, but he's a bad, tough guy.
Mother, hush your mouth. Yeah.
Yes. He's a tough guy, and he's tougher than a lot of 21-year-old guys today that are just very soft and effeminized. That old man in the hat has done more tough things than the average 21-year-old today. And I mean, that's going to be a hard word, and people might send us hate mail, but I just think that
there was just a TikTok guy who went viral talking about, well, if there is a draft, I can't be drafted because I'm on Wellbutrin or whatever medicine of choice he was on. It's like we have created such an effeminate people. Like it's I think you're spot on, Krista. Like it is just the effemination of people across the board. We can't do tough things. Tough things are traumatic and traumatizing. War is hell, and war happens.
Yep.
Tough things happen. And so I think you're on with like, how are we supposed to defend our own nation when it's traumatic to close your border? How are we supposed to defend our own nation when we have to make sure that anybody, and never mind, I'm not gonna say that.
Yeah, let's
we get. I'll say this. My opinion is that war is the epitome of the fall, right? And we want to see the height of what it means to be fallen. It is war. It is the most gruesome, barbaric. It is not good. So when I was in basic training, this colonel, she was asking us, "Hey, who joined for school money? Who joined to get away from home? Who joined to travel?" All these different reasons. And she said, none of that matters anymore. At the end of the day, what we do is we break things, we kill people. And the room was silent because it was a realization that, wait a minute, that is what we do. That is what the military is designed to do. We break things and we kill people. When that missile is launched, it is designed to break something or kill somebody. It is the taking of life. It is something that should always be the last resort. It should be avoided at all costs. But the minute it is determined that war is necessary, you go to war, right? It's easy for me to say that as someone who is, I understand the civilian position. I'll say that. And it's a reason that war should not be televised, because the average person cannot take what is actually happening, But
all those videos that we saw on social media on October 7th, I'm not sure the humans are designed to take in that much violence in real time.
No,
it was horrible.
I know I'm desensitized to some things just from what I've seen over my career. I mean, I've seen beheadings. I've seen all types of atrocities. I've seen the remains that are left after a suicide bomber. And just to give you a example of what we're fighting, I have seen the enemy, these people, these jihadist groups, strap a bomb to a woman who is mentally ill, mentally challenged, like, Down syndrome, and because they know she will get through security, and she walks into a market and they remote detonate her. That is what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. That is the level of depravity we are dealing with. So beheading babies is nothing. These people, you're nothing but cattle to them. There is no Imago Dei. There is no, even as Western government, when we go to war, there's still this sense of we're going to protect women and children, right? That doesn't exist on that side. It is simply ravaging everything. It is kill at all costs. You mean absolutely nothing. I mean, the level of that it takes to hold somebody's head and take a knife and do what you do, like a fish, and that person's alive. Like, that is just, and then you laugh about it, you joke about it, you film it, you post it, you take their head and you sit on their behind because you think that's funny. That's what I've seen. That is what Hamas is. And that is what is at Israel's doorstep every day. And if their security ever fails, October 7th is what happens. I don't know how you live next door to that. I don't know how you make peace with that. I don't know how you negotiate with that. There isn't. And that's what I want people to understand, the mindset that is here, regardless of land disputes. And that is, at the end of the day, there is a group that is hell-bent on murdering people, regardless of status of military, civilian, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And so understanding that level of depravity, when you go to war against that, you have to go in and root that out, because they're not surrendering. They believe they're going to go to see Allah if they die in this. This is a fight. And Israel know, and like I saw one guy interview, he was in the military. He says, we have to go in, but I know that me or all my friends aren't coming back out. But we have to go in. They know what they have to do. They're not coming home. And so that's the real, the politics, the news, all of this fake stuff, it doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, that is what this is about. You have one group that will go in and risk their lives to save women and children. Other that will go in to murder as many as they can. That's the difference. I want
to look at Krista's question here. She says, is there any factual truth, as Palestinians have claimed, of Israel's military committing crimes against Palestinians, beheading, rape, etc.? I hear this frequently, as though Israel is committing genocide. And I just want to add to that this graphic that I've seen all over the internet, of, in red, you can see the number of Palestinian deaths. In blue, you can see the number of Israeli deaths. And this chart goes back to 1987. And what you could see, they use this kind of data to say, well, see, the Palestinians are living in a genocide every day. Look at these numbers. Look at the number of deaths versus Israeli deaths. And the apologists will say, what Hamas did this is a quote from an interview I watched this morning. What Hamas did on October 7th happens every day in Gaza and the West Bank. And these are the numbers that prove it. So what say you, Kevin, to that kind of reason?
Yeah. So you sent me this. I just shook my head, because that graph,
you analyze data all the time. So I know you got
what the headline says is, and this is it, between Israel and the Palestinians, since 1987, there have been 14,000 deaths in this conflict. 14,000 since 1987. That is a horrible attempt at genocide if that's the case. Just to give a comparison, in World War II, there were between 350,000 and 500,000 German civilians killed in World War II. 500,000. And we're talking about 14,000. And nobody says, oh, that was a German genocide, right? Nobody, it is completely void of context.
But if you just look at this proportionally, this looks bad. This looks like Israel is wiping out the Palestinians.
No, because there are 2.1 million Palestinians just in Gaza alone. These numbers are not wiping anybody out. But like I said, we talked about earlier, when you have a terrorist group that is operating in civilian neighborhoods, there are going to be casualties that are the effect of that, right? It's not that Israel is going there to kill civilians, but when they go in, and this is another thing, because Israel can't go into Gaza, because they're not on the ground, it's difficult to be more precise with your targeting from a military standpoint. I'll say that when you don't have anybody on the ground that can put eyes on and guide you into what you're trying to target, right? When you're trying to just do it from the air. And so like Israel, they have they know where the missile's fired from, and they can go back and respond to where the missile is fired from. But that doesn't mean that, and there's just no way to avoid it from someone who's been in this position in urban areas trying to target somebody who's firing rockets from a neighborhood. There's no way to take out that rocket or that rocket launcher and not hit anything else around it. It just isn't possible, right? And Hamas knows that. That's why they do it. And so numbers, yeah, because Israel has the Iron Dome, right? So when Hamas fires rockets, Israel has a defense system that engages and shoots down as many rockets as they can. If the trajectory of the rocket is not going to be in a populated area, it lets it hit the ground. And so it's one of those things that Israel just has better defenses, but Hamas tries to kill as many, right? Intentionally, they launch rockets, at civilian neighborhoods. Israel just has to put in a defense system that can shoot most of them down. And so those numbers aren't really, I'll say this, those numbers are not reflective of intent. I think that's the biggest takeaway. And that's what no one wants to talk about. Israel isn't doing a bombardment on civilians just to kill civilians and wipe them out. If they did, there'd be way more than 14,000 since 1987.
It also makes me ask the question, though, like with the hospital situation where it was a Hamas rocket that, came back on itself on their own people. I wonder, too, are the numbers all accurate in all of this just came from Israel, or
that's
were some of your people also killed by your own people?
Not just that. I tell people, like, this hospital thing is a great example. I'm glad it happened because, we have determined that where the rocket didn't come from Israel, and we determined that it hit the parking lot. But nobody came back and said, wait a minute, they said 500 people got killed. Where did the number come from? They give out false numbers all the time. So that's why I don't even put a whole lot of stock in any of these numbers, because they lie. They lie for propaganda. And this hospital thing is a perfect example of how it happens. And then nobody goes back and corrects the 500 number that died at the hospital. It just becomes a number.
And
right?
I'm going to release on Monday, so people can watch for it, an interview about with our friend Laura Powell about Islam and the teaching of Islam about violence, and putting in some theological context and perspective. One of the things we talk about at the end of the conversation is about a practice in Islam that it's okay to lie. Yes. And so I'm wondering if some of this propaganda for some Muslims has a theological warrant in their worldview that it's okay to lie, especially if you're at war.
If you're at war,
they might not even look at it as propaganda. For them, that's what is part of their practices.
Yeah.
Do you think that this charge, though, that that the Israeli military commits crimes against Palestinians, such as rape and this sort of thing that we hear in the media, do you think that it could be possible that there are rogue soldiers that do engage in that sort of based behavior?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Even in the U.S. military, as much as we're trained on it, as much as it's against the UCMMJ, it's against the rules, against the law. It doesn't stop somebody from going out and doing it. If they get caught, they get court-martialed, they get punished. But it happens out there. You're talking war. You're talking young 20-year-old teenagers, and they out there and they're fighting and they're angry, and sometimes they do things that they shouldn't. And a lot of times it gets back. It doesn't go unpunished or unheard. But when they just make these blanket statements that, hey, this is happening, like the guy said, this is happening every day in Gaza, or just these broad claims, unsubstantiated claims that this is what's happening. Usually that's not the case. Because if I could be wrong, but I don't even think the ground invasion of Gaza has even started. I could be wrong, but I don't think it started. I think they're still waiting. It's just all from the air. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's why I'm like, you just even from journalists and humanitarian organizations, I take everything they say with a grain of salt, because I've seen them. A lot of times they're ideologically driven as well, right? And they are sympathetic to the side that they're there to give humanitarian aid to, right? And they lie about numbers. Not only that, I used to joke, I used to say, hold up, we as people with information that no one else has, a lot of times can tell you this person's involved in terrorism, this person isn't. How does the humanitarian aid people know who's a terrorist and who isn't, who's a civilian and who isn't? They're not like they're wearing uniforms, right? So when they talk about, oh, we had all these civilians get killed, how do you know they're civilians, right? They have no way of distinguishing between who's Hamas and who's not, who's Al-Qaeda and who's not. They have no idea distinguishing that. So when they give those numbers out, I don't give them any credence, even from the humanitarian aid organizations.
Okay. Well, this has been good. We're a little over the hour, so I guess it's as good a time as any to close out, put a bookmark here. I'm sure we will continue some of these themes. This has been helpful, Kevin. Just walking us through, making sense of all of this. It's hard to stay grounded, and war is difficult and confusing, and there's a reason why they call it the fog of war. But helping us kind of think through some of the cultural issues and the strategic issues, super helpful. Monique, did you have any final words?
Yeah, I would just encourage people, just like we did in 2020, seek evidence and seek truth.
Yep.
Start in scripture first before you look for evidence out in the culture or what's happening over there. Seek biblical truth. What is our perspective? How should we think about human people? Like, what does the scripture say about life, about these issues first, and then go and seek real evidence, not just the propaganda or the data that's thrown at you from news media outlets. Let us be driven by scripture first, because the culture is always going to seek to pull you into a story, into a narrative, into whatever it is they're trying to sell. Make sure that we are united on Christ and on the truth of scripture, because that is our foundation for unity.
Yeah. Yep. Kevin, any final words?
I think Mo said it really well. I just tell people to, like I say, just be slow to make a determination when you first see something. There's propaganda on both sides, because it's a PR war. Even on the Israeli side, they're putting out videos of what did happen, but they're putting those things out to draw sympathy, right? You just have to be aware of that. War is partially a propaganda war to drive public opinion. And so both sides are doing it. You just be aware of, don't buy into the idea that both sides are equal and that the virtuous position is just this middle ground position. And that's what I see a lot of. There are times where that is the case. That this is not one of those. These are not two equally guilty parties in any shape or form or fashion.
So Tanya is asking a great question, and maybe this is something we can address in the future that I would love to do is, what does the Bible describe about war? Or we could talk about just war theory, or, the idea of how do we as the new covenant people of God relate to war, and the principle of protecting the innocent and punishing the guilty and all of that. That's a whole conversation, but it's a worthwhile one for us to think about as a future conversation. So Tanya, I don't want you to think that we're ignoring the question. It's just a big question, but I think it's a worthy question of a whole discussion. So
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We hope that you'll like this video, share it out with your friends, your family, your enemies, and just continue to tune into Center for Biblical Unity. We're going to continue bringing more resources. I did a live stream on Monday that you can get through the Center for Biblical Unity or over on my channel, Theology Mom, explaining about Jews and Judaism and Israel and kind of the Christians' unique relationship with Jewish people. So covering the issues from a theological angle. On Monday, I'm having a podcast drop. It's called Myths and Facts about Islam and violence. So you're not going to want to miss that. And also I'm going to be having a report from somebody, a friend of the ministry who lives in Jerusalem, will be giving us a firsthand account of what they've been through and some insight into how the complexities of the Israeli government and how all of that works. So keep tuning in. We will do our very best to continue to equip you to have these conversations in a biblically focused way. Take care, everyone. God bless.
Bye.